Kamal makes deploying web applications to your preferred infrastructure a breeze. With a single command, you can have a fully functional app running on any server you choose, making it an excellent alternative to pricier platforms like Heroku. However, it has its trade-offs, mainly that you need to manage a lot of the maintenance work yourself. One of the essential things you need to handle yourself when using Kamal are backups, particularly database backups. Kamal will help you spin up and manage relational database servers easily, but you're responsible for the data stored on those servers. That means you need to set up systems to perform backups and easily restore them when necessary. Nowadays, most web applications use PostgreSQL as their primary database in production environments. In this video, I'll show you a quick and easy way to back up PostgreSQL databases for your Kamal deployed web apps and store them securely on an Amazon S3 bucket. Let's see how it works. For this video, I'm going to use a web application that's already configured to use Kamal. I have a video that demonstrates how to set up web applications and deploy them using Kamal. So if you want to learn more about how Kamal works, go check out that video. The deployed web application I'll use for this video uses PostgreSQL as its primary database. I want to begin making backups for the database in case of disaster, which can happen when you least expect it. I can make backups locally by connecting to the database container using a few Kamal commands and dumping the output of the database into a file, but that's tedious and error prone. And let's be honest, we rarely do manual backups ourselves. A better solution is to make the process automated on the production environment itself. Thankfully, there's an easy way to do this with Kamal by setting up the Postgres Backup S3 Docker image created by Elliot Sugarman. This Docker image allows you to run a container that can make backups of the data in a PostgreSQL server that's also running on a Docker container and send it to an Amazon S3 bucket for safekeeping. It also allows you to restore a backup to your Docker-based PostgreSQL server. You can create backups on the fly or on a recurring schedule. You can encrypt the backups as well and specify the number of days worth of backups you want to keep. And it even allows you to use S3 compatible storage providers in case you're not using AWS. The image provides a ton of functionality to help you keep your PostgreSQL data safe when running the service in a Docker container. Since Kamal works with Docker containers, we can include this image as an accessory, which is what Kamal calls any service that's managed separately from your web application. Let's set this up in our existing Kamal configuration to get backups working. For this example, I already have an Amazon S3 bucket configured, as well as the access key ID and secret access key for an IAM user that has access to read and put files into this bucket. You need to set these up for your AWS account before configuring the Postgres Backup SQL Docker image. Under my existing database accessory in the Kamal configuration file, I'll add a new accessory called Backups. I'll set the image of this service to the Docker image, which is EE_Sugarman/Postgres-backup-S3. Now, it's important to use the correct tag for this image that matches the major version of the PostgreSQL server you want to back up. In my application, I'm using Postgres 16.2, so I'll need to use the tag called 16 for this image. Make sure that you use the correct tag for your version of PostgreSQL. After setting the image, we have to specify the host for running the container. I'll run this container on the same server where the database is located, so I'll copy this IP address and set it here. Now we'll need to configure the service, which is done through environment variables. Under the env key for this accessory, we'll set up a few required variables. I'll place some of the variables under clear, which are safe to expose in the configuration file. And I'll set some sensitive data under secret, since I don't want to have these exposed in plain text. Under clear, I'll first set the S3 bucket environment variable, which is the name of the Amazon S3 bucket where I want to store my backups. In my example, the bucket name is Airport Gap DB Backups. The next clear environment variable that I'll set is the S3 prefix. which is like a subdirectory in the S3 bucket where the backup files will go. I'll set this to Postgres. I believe this is optional, but it's nice to include it to keep the bucket organized. Next, I'll set the S3 region to indicate the region where the bucket resides in. In my case, the bucket is in the region AP Northeast 1. So that's what I'll set here. Now I want to configure how often we'll back up the database. We can configure that with the schedule environment variable. The value of this variable uses a cron expression such as 0, 0, asterisk, 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 meaning that a command will run every day at midnight. Or we can use one of the predefined schedules used by the underlying cron package. I want to take a daily backup, so instead I'll set this value as at daily. For this value, we'll need to enclose it in quotes due to the @ sign. It's important to set up the schedule value when using this Docker image in Kamal. When the schedule isn't configured, the Postgres backup S3 Docker image will create a backup and exit the container immediately. Kamal, on the other hand, will automatically attempt to start any stop containers, meaning that it'll fall into a loop where it'll spin up the service, create a database backup, shut down, only to have Kamal start up the container again. You likely don't want this, so make sure that the schedule environment variable is set. Finally, I want to configure this service to only keep the last 7 days worth of backups on S3. We can do that by setting the backup keep days environment variable, and I'll set it to 7. Any backups older than the number of days we set here will be deleted from the Amazon S3 bucket automatically so they don't pile up. So that does it for the clear environment variables. Next up, I'll set up the secret environment variables. The first one I'll set is the S3 access key ID environment variable, which is the access key ID for the IAM user that has access to put files into this bucket. The next variable to set here is the S3 secret access key. This is the secret access key for the IAM user. Now we need to tell which PostgreSQL database we want to back up. We have 4 environment variables to set for that. The first one is Postgres host, which is the IP address of the PostgreSQL server. Next is Postgres database, which is the name of the database we want to back up. The last 2 variables to configure are the Postgres user and Postgres password, which are the credentials for connecting to the database server. Remember to set up the value for all of these secret environment variables in your .m file for Kamal to pick them up. You'll likely have the Postgres user and Postgres password values set up, but make sure you have all of these values configured correctly. Our Kamal configuration is now set up to use this new accessory. The next step we want to do is to push the new environment variables to our servers, since Kamal doesn't do this automatically after the initial server setup. I'll do this with Kamal env push. This takes care of placing the environment variables for the server. Now we can finally spin up the backup service with Kamal accessory boot and backups, which is the name of the accessory we want to spin up. This command sets up the new backup service we just configured. Kamal will start a new container using the Postgres backup S3 Docker image, which we can then verify once it's set up using the Kamal accessory details backups. So as we can see, the image has been up and running. At this point, the container will wait for the next scheduled time to run the backups. I set the schedule to run daily, which happens at midnight UTC. However, I don't want to wait until that time to see if everything is configured correctly. I can manually run the backup script from the new container using Kamal. To do that, I'll run the Kamal accessory exec command with the reuse flag so we don't spin up a separate container, and with the interactive flag so I can see what's happening when running the backup script in the container. After setting the flags, the next argument is the accessory name. which is backups. And finally, we'll specify the command to run in the container. The command to trigger the backup script in this image is sh backup.sh, which runs a shell script that makes a dump of the configured PostgreSQL database that we set up and uploads it to our defined Amazon S3 bucket. Make sure the command is enclosed in quotes so Kamal knows to send this entire command to the container. Let's execute this command to see it in action. As we see, the shell script created a backup of our database and uploaded it successfully to Amazon S3. It also removed any old backups from the bucket since that's how we configured it. If I go to my AWS console and refresh the S3 bucket, I'll see the Postgres prefix, and inside we'll have our database dump. So it looks like our backup service is working successfully and ready to take daily snapshots of the database. If at this point you run into any errors, make sure you included all the environment variables for S3 and your PostgreSQL server in the Kamal deployment configuration, and that the correct values are set in the .m file. Also, make sure that you push the environment variables to the server using the Kamal env push command. Now, let's say a few days passed and you have a couple days worth of backups in your S3 bucket. Something happened to your PostgreSQL server where you need to restore the data from a backup. The accessory we spun up has another shell script that handles the restoration automatically for you. We can do this using Kamal by once again running the Kamal accessory exec command with the reuse and interactive flags for the backups accessory, as we did when creating our first backup. This time, instead of running the backup shell script, instead we'll run the restore shell script. This shell script will find the last modified database dump in the configured S3 bucket and restore it on your PostgreSQL server. We'll see here that it fetched the latest backup from S3, downloaded it, and restored the backup. That's all there is to restoring a database dump, which is that simple thanks to this Docker image. Keep in mind that restoring the database will drop the existing database and recreate it from scratch, so you lose anything that was in the database between the time the backup was taken and the time the backup is restored. Now, there might be cases where you want to restore an older database backup instead of the latest. To do that, you can use the same restore shell script and append a timestamp to the command that Kamal sends to the container. For instance, let's say I have these three database dumps. One is from June 22nd, one is from June 23rd, and one is from June 24th. Let's say I want to restore the one from June 22nd. So the timestamp I'll need to use is a date and timestamp that's part of this file name. So I'll just go ahead and copy this whole file name. And then in the command, I'll append this, but I'll remove everything except the timestamp. So it pretty much will just keep this timestamp here. When executing this command, we'll see that it fetches that specific database dump instead of the latest one and restores it. That's all there is to backing up and restoring your PostgreSQL database when you use Kamal. But what if you don't use Amazon S3 or prefer to use another cloud-based object storage service? Nowadays, we have different object storage services that are compatible with Amazon S3's APIs, meaning that you can easily swap with another API that can handle the same requests. One such service is Cloudflare R2, which is an attractive alternative to Amazon S3 due to its zero egress fee storage. We can use the Postgres backup S3 Docker image that we set up to send the backups to Cloudflare R2 instead of S3. I already set up a Cloudflare R2 bucket with an API token, which gives us an S3 compatible access key ID and secret access key, along with an API endpoint for this bucket. Going back to the Kamal configuration, I'll set up a new clear environment variable called S3 endpoint. This endpoint is for any other object storage service that's compatible with Amazon S3. So I'll paste the value of this endpoint provided by Cloudflare. As for the other environment variables, I'll keep the S3 bucket the same, since my R2 bucket name is exactly the same. I'll also keep the S3 prefix as it is. For the S3 region, we'll have to switch from whatever we have on AWS to auto so that it works on R2. Everything else will remain the same, but remember to update the S3 access key ID and the S3 secret access key details in your .env file to use the Cloudflare R2 credentials. After updating these environment variables and setting the values in .env, we need to push them to the container using Kamal env push. Once that's done, we'll reboot our backups accessory by running Kamal accessory reboot backups. This command will stop and remove the existing container and start a new one with the updated configuration. When that's done, let's run Kamal accessory details backups to make sure that the container is running, which it is. So now let's trigger a manual backup to make sure that our configuration is correct. I'll execute the same backup command as before with Kamal accessory exec with the reuse and interactive flags for the backup service, and we'll run the backup shell script. If everything is set up properly, we'll see the backup get created and uploaded exactly as before. While it does seem that the backup was uploaded to S3, it actually gets uploaded to Cloudflare R2 because we set the S3 endpoint inside of our configuration. If we go to R2 and refresh the bucket, we'll see the prefix is now here, and the database dump has been done successfully. With just a few tweaks, we can easily swap out the object storage service we prefer without too much hassle. Besides Cloudflare R2, there are plenty of other object storage services you can use that might suit you better, so you won't have to always choose AWS for these backups. Tools like Kamal can help save you time and money by letting you use the hardware of your choice to run your web applications. However, you need to take care of backing up your systems, which can create additional work for you. But thanks to the Postgres Backup S3 Docker image, you can quickly set up database backups and safely store them on Amazon S3 or a similar object storage service with just a few lines of additional configuration. This video shows how easy it is to make backups of your PostgreSQL database and restore them when using web apps deployed with Kamal. If you're running a web app that uses PostgreSQL running on Docker, I highly recommend using this Docker image to keep your data safe in case of emergency. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing to this channel for more tips on helping developers ship their code confidently, from development to deployment. You can also check my website for more in-depth articles covering Rails, testing, DevOps, and other software engineering topics. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.